I'm back. This video, the reason I'm making the video is to try to explain how those big rocket mass heaters work with the big heat sink and the Cobb bench and all that good stuff. Because if you look at it all in one big drawing, it can get a little confusing. But the best way to think about it is to separate the big barrel and all that and the heat sink, separate that from the actual rocket stove. Because the heart of the system is basically the regular old J-tube, highly insulated rocket stove, just like this. Now, to recap, what we've got is we've got an insulated J-tube with probably surrounded by vermiculite or some other kind of insulating material. Generally, it's made of fire brick, and on the outside of the fire brick, you've got like some kind of insulation. Then you've got wood going down into the J-tube, and then they start a small fire, then throw the big wood in there, and basically it burns from the bottom, pulling air down. And then, of course, the heat stays really hot in here because there's no place for it to go because it's insulated and it's in a confined area. And then it hits this J-tube, and when it goes around the corner here, it starts to spin, right? And then it hits this wall and also spins. I think it spins the other way, though. But anyway, you got this big turbulent mass at super high temperature, and it causes things like carbon particles and whatnot to actually be burned, whereas normally they would just be deposited as ash, or they would go up your flue and end up descending upon your neighborhood as sort of an ash layer and dust. Well, anyway, and of course people would breathe it, and it's bad for you to breathe that stuff. So that's one of the reasons why why it's mandated that we put like catalytic converters and soot filters on trucks and buses and whatnot these days. Adding a lot to the expense of the bus, may I say. But anyway, here we have the rocket stove. So what they do to convert the rocket stove into a rocket mass heater is they take a barrel, like just a regular old metal barrel, and they either sand off the paint or burn a fire in the barrel to heat it up really hot and burn the paint off. And then they just set this barrel. Before I go to that point, maybe I should clarify one thing. Okay, you know, if you have a chimney, like people think that in order to get smoke out of a house or out of a fire in a stove or a fireplace, you need a big long chimney for the air to be sucked up and out of the house, right? But that's not necessarily true. You see, fires that are in a chimney or from a fireplace, they're generally the smoke and the ash and everything, I mean, the exhaust is not as hot as it is in a regular old rocket stove like this. So what you have is a long chimney to the roof, and then it vents, right? And that long chimney is necessary because it has to rise up and draw the fire or the smoke out. If it's a short thing that just sticks out the wall or something, it wouldn't draw, and then you would have smoke inside your house. Well, anyway, if you have hotter temperatures like you have here in this really short chimney, basically the hotter the gases are, the lighter they are because they've expanded a lot, and there's really less molecules per cubic foot, so they're vastly lighter, like maybe 1/10 of the normal weight over here. So basically, it just sucks it out. I know that's an illusion, but what happens is the ambient air pressure pushes down here, and then it's very, very much lighter here, so it just rises up and just flows right through. Now, if you have a a chimney like this of, say, that's like 1,000 degrees, it will rise just as well as a chimney that is 10 times longer but only has 1/10 of the temperature, right? So, for example, like 200 or 100 degrees, right? Or no, that's a bad example. Let's call it 200 degrees and a say a 5 or 6 foot chimney, right? You would have a significant amount of draw. But if you had 1,000 degrees and only a 1 foot chimney, you'd be getting the same amount of draw, roughly, because the temperature is so much hotter and the gases are so much lighter coming out of the rocket stove. So that's why they really don't need a long chimney with a rocket stove. Now, let me continue to explain how the rocket mass heater or the mass heater section is attached to the rocket stove. Because there's limited functionality with this. I mean, you can cook on it by sticking a pot on top of it or something, but there's really not a lot you can do otherwise with this type of stove. But imagine if you take a barrel, right, and you have some blocks or so that support the barrel a little bit off of the stove, right? You have blocks here supported by maybe bricks. Well, anyway, then you take a barrel and you make sure that this is high enough, right? And then you have about 1 inch or so, or 1.5 inches between the top of the J-tube and the barrel. And then you just set the barrel down over it like so. And that is the first part of the mass heater. What happens is the rocket stove blasts the rocket exhaust and it hits the barrel and it heats it up really hot, and that acts as a radiant heater for quick heating of your house, right? And you could then vent it out of an exhaust system, right? You have another pipe coming out of it like so, and that basically once the exhaust comes up, hits this, right, and then as soon as it hits this, it immediately becomes vastly cooler than it is inside here, and then it contracts really quick in this section right here. And then, since it's so much heavier here than it is here, it actually pulls down. It's heavier, so its weight pulls down, and it pulls. So basically, the heat is coming up here, and it's really blasting out, and then it cools down dramatically here, and then these cooler gases fall down. So the result is this is almost like a pump because of the way it's constructed. Hot air rises, cool air falls. And so that is pretty much all the draw you need in the system. You don't need to have any kind of big, huge, tall chimney because your chimney's under the barrel right here. Now, they could vent the gases right here, but they don't usually. Because the gases are pretty hot still, even after going through the barrel, 400 or 500, 600 degrees probably. And then, so instead what they do is they take the like black stove pipe or something, and they run it next to it like so, and then they loop it back and forth once or twice. This is horizontal, I should say. Wow, sorry about my artistry. Well, anyway, this is an S-shaped pipe, which is on ground level or really close to it, and they basically cover that with a mixture of rubble and gravel and old bricks, and then they coat the entire thing with a mixture of cob, and that's like like straw and mud all mixed together, and then they trowel it together, and then they make a big bench out of it, right? And then they like spray the really fine mixture on the surface with some kind of oil, and then it turns it into some kind of polymer, if I understand correctly, and that causes it to not rub off when you like sit on it or something. Well, anyway, then after it goes through this big thermal mass, heating this whole thermal mass up, then the gases coming out of the thermal mass are probably only like 150 to 200 degrees, and at that point you can just run it out the wall through a dryer vent if you wanted to, or you could plug it into a chimney if you have one handy, and it'll just go up the chimney. And that is the Cobb rocket stove mass heater system. So basically you have quick heat here. You use smaller diameter wood, mostly like scrap wood that most people wouldn't even bother trying to burn. Then the heat comes up and it heats this barrel, so you get immediate heat and to take the chill off your place right away. And then you heat 5 or a couple thousand pounds of thermal mass, and then it's vented. And then, like after, if you burn it for several hours, then you go to sleep, and then the next day this thermal mass is still heating your place, and it keeps the chill off of your place when you are, even before you start a new fire. Now, I kind of was concerned that there would be a problem with venting and pulling air through even when the fire isn't going, because of the heat in the system, right? But I don't believe it'll do that, because shortly after the fire burns out, this area will cool down rather dramatically pretty quick. And then at that point, the temperature inside the chimney and inside the barrel will be more or less the same. So the amount of draw going through will decrease dramatically, and your thermal mass can still be pretty hot, and that would prevent it from pumping warm air out of your house throughout the night. And if you wanted to, if you were still awake once the fire burned down, you looked in there and it's out, you could take a cover or something and shove it over there. Then the whole thing would probably stay a little bit warmer. So this is my take on the rocket mass heater system. And if I've missed any details or I've got something glaringly incorrect, go ahead and give me a little input, and I would certainly love to hear it. Later.